Please, people, before you go to the polls, please know who you're voting for. Don't vote for Barack Obama just because he's black. There are plenty of great black Americans that are conservative and constitutionalists that will not destroy our Constitution. I'll get to that in a minute. But first I want to read to you an open letter to the Democratic Party written by Lieutenant Colonel Frances Rice, U.S. Army retired. She is the chairman, the national chairman of the National Black Republican Association, and you can find their website at nbra.info. nbra.info. She wrote, "We African American citizens of the United States declare and assert, whereas in the early 1600s, 20 African men and women were landed in Virginia from a Dutch ship as slaves, and from that tiny seed grew the poisoned fruit of plantation slavery, which shaped the course of American development. Whereas reconciliation and healing always begin with an apology and an effort to repay those who have been wronged. Whereas the Democratic Party has never apologized for their horrific atrocities and racist practices committed against African Americans during the past 200 years, nor for the residual impact that those atrocities and practices and current soft bigotry of low expectations are having on us today. Whereas the Democratic Party fought to expand slavery and after the Civil War established Jim Crow laws, black codes, and other repressive legislation that were designed to disenfranchise African Americans. Whereas the Ku Klux Klan was the terrorist arm of the Democratic Party, and their primary goal was to intimidate and terrorize African American voters, Republicans who moved south to protect African Americans, and any other whites who supported them. Whereas, according to leading historians, both black and white, the horrific atrocities committed against African Americans during slavery and Reconstruction were financed, sponsored, and promoted by the Democratic Party and their Ku Klux Klan supporters. Whereas, from 1870 to 1930, in an effort to deny African Americans their civil rights and to keep African Americans from voting Republican, thousands of African Americans were shot, beaten, lynched, mutilated, and burned to death by Ku Klux Klan terrorists from the Democratic Party. Whereas Democratic Presidents Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Harry Truman rejected anti-lynching laws in efforts to establish a permanent civil rights commission. Democrats. Whereas the Democratic Party has used racist demagoguery to deceive African Americans about the history of the Republican Party that A, started as an anti-slavery party in 1854, B, fought to free African Americans from slavery, C, designed Reconstruction, a 10-year period of unprecedented political power for African Americans, D, passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the United States Constitution granting African Americans freedom, citizenship, and the right to vote, E, passed the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and 1875, granting African Americans protection from the black codes and prohibiting racial discrimination and public accommodations. F, passed the Civil Rights Act of 1957 and the Civil Rights Acts of 1964 and 1965, granting African Americans protection from the Jim Crow laws. G, established affirmative action programs to help African Americans proper with Republican President Richard Nixon's 1969 Philadelphia Plan that set the first goals and timetables, and his 1972 Equal Opportunity Employment Act that made affirmative action programs the law of our land. And H, never promised or launched a program, passed laws, or engaged in practices that resulted in the death of millions of African Americans. Republicans did that for the African Americans, not Democrats. Whereas Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, a 1954 decision by Chief Justice Earl Warren, who was appointed by Republican President Dwight Eisenhower, was a landmark civil rights case that was designed to overturn the racist practices that were established by the Democratic Party. Whereas Democratic President Franklin Delano Roosevelt received the vote of African Americans, he banned African American newspapers from the military shortly after taking office because he was convinced the newspapers were communists. Whereas Democratic President John F. Kennedy voted against the 1957 Civil Rights Law, opposed the 1963 March on Washington by Martin Luther King, and was later criticized by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. for ignoring civil rights issues. Whereas Democratic President John F. Kennedy authorized the FBI supervised by his brother, Attorney General Robert Kennedy, to investigate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on suspicion of being a communist. Whereas Democratic Senator Robert Byrd of West Virginia, a former member of the Ku Klux Klan, made a 14-hour filibuster speech in the Senate in June of 1964 in an unsuccessful effort to block passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and was heralded in April 2004 by Democratic Senator Christopher Dodd as a senator who would have been a great leader during the Civil War. Right. Whereas, when the 1964 Civil Rights Act came up for vote, Senator Al Gore Sr. and the rest of the Southern Democrats voted against the bill. Whereas, in the House of Representatives, only 61% of the Democrats voted for the 1964 Civil Rights Act as compared to 80% of the Republicans. And in the Senate, only 69% of the Democrats voted for the 1964 Civil Rights Act compared to the 82% of the Republicans. Whereas Democratic President Bill Clinton sent troops to Europe to protect the citizens of Bosnia and Kosovo while allowing an estimated 800,000 black Rwandans to be massacred in Africa, vetoed the welfare reform law twice before signing, and refused to comply with a court order to have shipping companies develop an affirmative action plan. Whereas Democratic presidential candidate Al Gore created harmful racial division when he falsely claimed that the 2000 presidential election was stolen from him and that African Americans in Florida were disenfranchised, even though a second recount of Florida votes by the Miami Herald and a consortium of major news organizations confirmed that he lost the election, and a ruling of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission declared that African Americans were not denied the right to vote. Whereas the Democratic Party's soft bigotry of low expectations and social promotions have consigned African Americans to economic bondage and created a culture of dependency on government social programs. Whereas the Democratic Party's use of deception and fear to block welfare reform, the faith-based initiative and school choice that would help African Americans prosper, is consistent with the Democratic Party's heritage of racism that included sanctioning of slavery and Ku Kluxery, a perversion of moral sentiment among leaders of the Democratic Party whose racist legacy bode ill unto this generation of African Americans. Now, therefore, for the above and other documented atrocities and accumulated wrongs inflicted upon African Americans, we demand a formal written apology and other appropriate remuneration from the leadership of the Democratic Party. Did you know that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a Republican? I'll bet you didn't. Please go to www.nbra.info and find out why. That's www.nbra, National Black Republican Association.info, and find out why. Remember, I asked you a few minutes ago not to vote for Obama just because he's black. There are so many black constitutionalists that won't destroy the Constitution but uphold it, that are far more qualified than Obama. And among those are the woman that wrote this open letter to the Democratic Party, for one, retired Lieutenant Colonel Frances Rice, who is the chairman of the National Black Republican Association. Or give me Alan Keyes, give me Clarence Thomas, give me Condi, give me J.C. Watts, give me Angela McGowan, give me Thomas Sowell, give me Star Parker. Color doesn't matter. Obama's skin color does not matter one bit. It's what is in his Marxist head that should scare us to death.